Vic Fontaine will live forever, Pallie. R.I.P. James Darren. Today on episode, 366 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland and the heart of TreklandTreks.com, your customized away mission in greater Los Angeles to the actual filming sites of the Star Treks you love, that you design. Yes, from all that for some sanity, clarity, and the big picture, or the bigger picture in all things Star Trek. Some sad news this week as we await fresh Trek as the summer winds down. Hope you had a wonderful Labor Day holiday, to date this a little bit. For those here in the States, what do you do in England? You have a bank holiday? Is that what it is? Same time we have Labor Day? A lot of little headlines flying by here, but the one that grabbed my interest, I came out of the cave, my remodeling cave. The wall is almost done. It's almost fully drywalled now. Sheetrocked, as we used to say. But the main news of the night was I realized what I'd be talking about today, because we got the news yesterday, released by his son, Jim Murray, who is a longtime reporter for ET, now with Access Hollywood, I think, that his dad, our very own James Darren, Jimmy Darren, to those who appreciate those things, passed away at 88. An incredibly wonderful long life. And if you just saw him with Dominic and Connor's show, the first incarnation, about a year and a half ago, he looked swell. He looked great. Had the whole world on his plate. And it's one of those cases where, age. Apparently his son announced that Jimmy needed an aortic replacement, a heart hose, and they deemed him not stable enough to be able to take it, sadly. So to withstand the shock of that severe surgery. And so that was pretty much, you can understand what was going on there. So hopefully that meant that they had time to get things in order. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, I'd love it if you could join us sometime live on a Tuesday afternoon. That would be great. And you could be here with the conversation. You could be here with, increasingly more guests. Hit them up for your question live in person. But yes, a sad moment. And here's the thing. Jimmy had such a long, great life here that a lot of folks were able to see him at Vegas. He loved performing. He had these worlds. Now, remember, I tweeted this yesterday when I came out of the construction tunnel and heard, I knew, and you can look around, I knew the world would be calling him, yes, he was the teen idol actor in the Gidget movies. He was Moondoggy. He had 2 or 3 hits. Goodbye, cruel world. I'm off to join the circus. Teenage angst songs circa 1960-62, before everything got so complicated. That was Jimmy. And Jimmy was Moondoggy. I saw an LA news story today that said teen idol credited with the surfing craze dies at 88. They were talking about Jimmy Darren. I'm like, what? Teen heartthrob? Yes, you forget the impact of Gidget and the Moon and Moondoggy and the surfing movies. I mean, then it led to Beach Blanket Bingo and the Beach Boys and all that crystallized the same time. But Gidget was a big instigator of the surfing craze of the 60s. And Moondoggy, our own Jimmy Darren, was right there in the middle of that. But by the 60s, after being on screen, he had been a serious drama actor, studied with Stella Adler from back East Coast, Jersey, New York, and birth name, just for the heck of it, birth name, James William Ercolani. Yes, old Italian family. Are you kidding me? And out here in LA in movies and then TV. And if not Moondoggy, then Time Tunnel, one of the guys trapped in time. A lot of directing. Oh, and T.J. Hooker. He's Shatner's cohort there. A lot of latter-day folks by the DS9 days remember that. But it all started with Gidget. I knew the world, though, was going to say Teen Idol, Moondoggy, and you'd be lucky if they mentioned anything else. You'd be lucky if they mentioned Time Tunnel and T.J. Hooker. And Vic Fontaine and DS9 were not going to be high up on the mainstream media's remembrance list. They're in the second paragraph. But here we are in Trekland, and we know what we remember Jimmy for. What's amazing is what Vic Fontaine did to restart Jimmy's singing career. He always talked about that. In fact, he didn't even know about that. Now, I have a little treat for you today. One of the things that, I mean, Jimmy's one of those that I had no connection or clue about him until basically the show was, till DS9 was over and we got into the post years and the fallow years for Trek. Because within a couple of years, Voyager was gone, and then there was Little Enterprise, and then it was gone. And those aught years was the singing. The Vic Fontaine character really led Jimmy back to what he loved, which was the standards that they sang when they were young. Yeah. Even his teen idol bits weren't all that hardcore. He was right there adjacent to the great. He knew Dean, he knew Frank. That's what gave Vic Fontaine such authenticity, Pallie. And he stepped back into that. It was his success and enjoyment playing Vic Fontaine that made him remember, after, you know, the years of the aging actor who turned to directing, and he had a ton of TV directing credits. But it was, and that's what he was doing about the time that Ira and the DS9 game came calling. Let me read you something that was never published. Ira wrote this for a piece about Jimmy for one of his CDs that was released. Because here's the funny thing. All through the aughts and the teens here in the last 15, 20 years, Jimmy Darren would call me randomly when he had a new CD coming out. He was so proud because we have a 20-piece orchestra and yada yada. And if you were lucky enough to see him sing in public, especially with a big orchestra, but even with the radio, with a DJ track, with a tape, because that's all he needed. It's like when you see the Rat Pack with a fuller orchestra, or you see anybody, it always enhances the moment, but the performers that don't need that to sell it to you and give you an evening to remember. And that was Jimmy. And so as a performance, as an audience member, if you were lucky enough to see him at Trek Vegas, at some other locations over the years, do that. And then for years, he would go out and sell. You didn't have to be a Vic Fontaine DS9 fan to appreciate Jimmy singing standards. And being one of the last to go do that after we lost so many of them over the years. I mean, you know, Dean and Frank, but I mean, on down Al Martino and on down and on down. And he was one of the last to give you that experience of that generation, which was awesome. And he was doing it just up until just a few years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago. 2011 was the year that Jimmy had the Saturday night concert slot at STLV. And I remember that really well, and some other years too, but I remember that year because that was the year I stood in the wings and shot pictures from the side. And it was a 2011 Canon ELPH and a 2011 iPhone camera. And I wasn't doing the best job without a professional rig, but there are 3 or 4 that just happened to catch right. And it's all from the wings with his, I'm going to Instagram some of these. I'm going to post some of these socially. But it's him singing a little bit out of focus, but with him on the screen to the left. And they're just a couple of really awesome pictures. I don't have that many selfies, although I've got some that may be buried. That's a special memory. But if you got yourself to STLV in those days when you were lucky enough to sing him, a few times he sat in with the Rat Pack as the years went by instead of doing a full, 1 hour, 2 hour set himself, 90 minutes, he would sit in with the Rat Pack a few times. And plenty of other concerts out on his own or teaming up with folks. We think about, I know just I think the last time he did something in public, obviously he did Dom and Connor's show a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, which was amazing. You should find that on their lineup. He and Frankie Avalon, this is the last thing he called me and said, can you promote this? But this was in 2022, post-pandemic. They didn't sing, but he and Frankie Avalon went out and did a sit-down Q&A out at Palm Springs, at Oscars of Palm Springs. An intimate evening with Jimmy Darren and Frankie Avalon. They didn't sing. They didn't have music. They sat and answered questions and talked and reminisced. And I knew at the time thinking, well, this must be the wind down. And that's fine. That was awesome. You got a few more fans, a few more folks in to see that generation. Again, you don't have to be a Star Trek fan to appreciate that, but he was like so many others in so many other fields, gave Star Trek a crossover with a wholly different attitude and a wholly different audience. Um, and I, had the chance to interview him a couple of times, once or twice in league with, I said, okay, we'll do an interview to promote one of your CDs. And of course, he did This One's From the Heart, which was all the Vic Fontaine songs. Did it on his own. They're all songs. He didn't have to copyright anything or IP with Star Trek officially. Nothing on it screams Star Trek or Vic Fontaine. It's Jimmy Darren, This One's From the Heart. But he's in his tux, and there's kind of a gauzy Las Vegas lounge stage behind him. And you know exactly what he's evoking. Of course, when you're writing the liner notes, you can talk about anything. And one of those albums after that, I think one of the last ones, well, this was in 99 that we talked. But just a couple of years ago, and I have to find it, The Coolest Guy in the Room. This was a little piece, a little one-page liner that Ira wrote for Jimmy for one of his later albums to promote it. And it was never used. So I'm going to share it with you right now. The Coolest Guy in the Room. It started with Ocean's 11, the original, with Frank and Dean and Sammy in side-divorce suits. Even as a kid, this is Ira talking, even as a kid, I knew that whenever Frank and company showed up, they were the coolest guys in the room. So, 38 years later, as showrunner of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, it made perfect sense to the Rat Pack wannabe, this Rat Pack wannabe, even if at first no one else, to add a holographic 60s Vegas lounge singer to the cast of a science fiction show. It made perfect sense to Ira, he's saying. But who could possibly play Vic Fontaine? All the original Rat Packers had taken a cab, and he needed somebody who could match Frank and Dean's breezy in schwa, as well as the pipes to croon a ballad or swing and standard. He needed, Ira says, I needed the coolest guy in the room. But the singers we auditioned couldn't really act, and the actors we got couldn't really sing. And then at a public event, I think it was this Hollywood signing show. At a public event, I saw James Darren. I didn't speak to him, but I watched him. I saw up close his effortless charm. He was the coolest guy in the room. And it was a big room. Best of all, I knew he could act, and I knew he could sing. Only trouble was, Jimmy didn't want to play a singer. He didn't even want to read the script. Talk about agita. Lucky for us, Evie, Jimmy's wife, convinced him to skim a few pages. Next thing we heard is he'd come to Paramount to meet, but he would not audition. It's an actor thing. We weren't quite sure if that would work. You always want to see the performer play the part before you hire them. But all Jimmy had to do was walk in and be himself. Within minutes, we all knew we'd found Vic Fontaine, the coolest guy in the room. Now, he tells a little bit more about this story in detail in the DS9 Companion that's making the rounds now as a memorial. It's funny. But Ira goes on here to say, whenever I could, I'd walk over to Vic's lounge on stage 7 to watch Jimmy do his thing. It was always a blast. But it was a TV show, and that's how Vic's songs were shot, with lots of stops and starts. It didn't really prepare me to see Jimmy live in 2005 before a packed house backed by a 16-piece band. There's nothing quite like it. The current of electricity in the air, the energy, the anticipation, and ultimately, the sweet moment of release when the drummer's hi-hat and the band kicks in. The crowd erupts as James Darren takes the stage. It was epic. So, when Jimmy told me he'd unearthed a soundboard recording of the show, I couldn't wait to relive that night. The 2005 show, Found Lost Recording, was what Jimmy was so excited to get out and promote years and years and years later. And Ira is talking about how excited that made him. And he finishes by saying, I won't lie, it's not quite the same as being there, but it's close. Damn close. And of course, you can get away with that when you're the coolest guy in the room. I wanted to share that. That was Ira's thoughts about it. I have one story. I didn't know Jimmy really well until the years when he would call me constantly to, hey, can you put in a little blurb? Can you get out the word that we've got a new CD coming? We've got a new thing that I'm going to do a show. Hey, I'm going to do a show in Vegas. I'm excited. I'm going to do a show in Des Moines. I've got 2 or 3 lined up in the earlier years right after DS9 when he first jumped back into this. Once or twice he said, yeah, I'm getting people calling me to direct, but I think I'm done with that. Directing was, what aging actors do when they age out of the demo that they first appeared in, unless they're very, very lucky or they have an agent manager that works overtime. We see that happen all the time. And then sometimes folks are lucky and they get a second honeymoon. They get a second shot at the apple. And that's what happened to Jimmy. Yeah, he had his acting gigs. He did some movies. He had bits and pieces over the years, aside from, the biggies, T.J. Hooker. Time Travel, Time Tunnel was only 1 season, but it was Irvin Allen and it was so memorable. T.J. he had 8 years with Shatner, and T.J. Hooker is where he started to direct and got the actor that is around for a while and moves in and Shatner had done the same thing. He got the chance to direct and did. So that's really where his second career, and that paid the bills. I thought for half a second that Jimmy had directed some like DS9s or something, Voyagers, the aughts, later 90s shows. But no, never directed a Star Trek, did plenty of others though. By that time, he had segued back onto stage and back with a mic in his hand, crooning and turning out the standards, and we all loved it. In fact, one of the times I specifically remember, the second Destination Star Trek, when the European company had the license for license conventions in Europe, and that's gone now. But when Destination Star Trek had its second show in London, second show overall, I was lucky enough to be a guest and went over, and Jimmy was there, not with the Rat Pack. Enterprise Blues Band played on a Friday night at an adjacent, it was in the big convention hall center there in the East Docks, the Excel Center. And then very nearby was an old brick tavern bar pub, not bigger than a pub, big, nightclub type place, old brick. And it was big enough to handle some night entertainment. So one night Enterprise Blues Band was booked into play, and the second night was Jimmy with a small combo live. Had everybody spellbound, did all the DS9 songs, including, The Way You Look Tonight, of course. And we were all having a blast, having fun. I was taking shots and pictures. And after a while, they took a break, But after a while, after half an hour or so, there was this one young, I say in her 20s, one young fan who seemed to be by herself, or maybe she was with friends. I don't know. But she worked her way up to the front of the very simple stage. It was just a platform stage, 18, 24-inch level. And there was barely, it's Europe. It wasn't exactly the Rathskeller, but, it was 2 or 3 feet from the edge of that lip to where the first folks were standing. And some people were dancing. A lot of people were singing. It was Jimmy's American Standard set. There wasn't wild dancing. But people were and they'd been drinking, so people were having a good time. And this one young lady wearing her TOS red dress, her dress, she was really enjoying it. But not when you say that at a nightclub, you go, oh yeah, she was. No, she was up front singing with the band, singing with Jimmy and the band. She was like song after song. After a while, I noticed it. Song after song after song. She didn't go away. She didn't get tired. She was just loving, because how often do you hear the standards, played live with even the hint of a live band with somebody of that talent? So it was a magic night. And if that was your groove, if you really loved that music, which apparently she did, she knew the words to everything. And she was singing. She wasn't mouthing the words. She was, and she wasn't in a drunken stupor because they weren't that kind of stuff. She was just enjoying it. And after a while, shortly before the break, eventually Jimmy noticed her too. And every once in a while would throw a little something her way. He would, when he's singing, he would play over and do that. And they took their break. And I went down, it was like down little thing, a little bitty old school dressing room. And I went down the stairs with the band. And I didn't know Jimmy really well. I was about to get to know him, but he knew me. He was Larry, the guy he sent the notices to, and would call to get blurbs in the magazine and such. And we were sitting there and talking, and the band sitting around, having their break. And he said, "Did you see that girl? Did you see that young lady? She knew everything." And the rest of the band knew it. They're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He said, "That was amazing. I love that. I love that." He said, "I haven't seen that in ages. She was that young and she knew everything." And he said, Larry, I bet she's got to still be up there. Can you go up and find her? Tell her to come down." So Jimmy Darren, I go up, me of many hats. now I'm handling for the band. I go up, and sure enough, she's there, just hanging around the stage, waiting for him to come back and finish this magic evening. Found out her name was Heather. She was from Brazil. She was in England studying medicine to be a medical doctor. She was in medical school, pre-med, in her bachelor's. And I said, we talked for a second, and I said, "Heather," I said, "you must enjoy the Great American Songbook, the standards." She was like, "Oh yeah, this is amazing. This is amazing." And I said, "Well, they couldn't help but notice you. Would you like to come down and meet Jimmy?" And she was just like, "Are you kidding me?" So we, in her red Uhura dress, and we went down, and she sat. And then the other half of the equation is, did she go goo goo gaga? No, she did not. She held it together. She was excited and thrilled, but she was the best kind of fan. And after that, they launched into a discussion. I mean, the band was there too, but she, and it was not I'm going to go up and cling to you, sir. I mean, Jimmy was in his, 60s and she's in her 20s. But it was as much of a love affair between a fan and a performer as you could have, and the thing that was performed, the music and the songs in that era. And they just talked. And they talked about songs. They talked about why she's there. I'm sure it was her parents. I don't remember now. But it was just a magic evening. And I had almost a dead phone, but I got one picture of the two of them. No pictures with me and Jimmy, of course. But I got a picture of the two of them that I sent to her later. And this is what, 2013, 2014? Anyway, it just tickled me so much to witness all that. And to have a small part in have, I mean, they didn't totally need me. They would have sent somebody else up to go find her. But I did not mind doing it because it was just a little magical moment. And she enjoyed it. I'm sure she's back in England. It's been almost 10 years. It was 2014, I think. It's been about 10 years. I kept up with her a little bit over time because some of the news coming out of Brazil wasn't great for a while. But she is still in medicine, is still studying in a postdoc now. But I'll never forget that night. What I won't forget most of all is the smile on her face and the shock and just the pure enjoyment. But what I also will never forget is the graciousness of Jimmy Darren. To have noticed that, to have been so tickled by seeing her there and enjoying the whole crowd. It was a great night. Great. What a band. What a show. What a crowd. What a night. And for him to do that he didn't have to do. And not just to have noticed her and gosh, God, what a sweet kid, Pallie, but to invited her in for a moment like that because she so enjoyed what he was doing. And he's no dummy. He knows that the audience for that is shrinking. And the fact that she was of her generation and enjoying it so much. And yeah, over the years, here's Jimmy signing, performing at Vegas a little more, performing out on his own, coming and signing at Vegas, whether you had a big show or not. The years he was jumping in with the Rat Pack with them, signing. I've got to dig. I know I've got some more photos with him. Besides one from Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters when he was honored by them and given a city. It was James Darren Day in LA County he has a certificate and all that. Ira came over to see him get that award at that banquet. Of all the times and all the little moments and all the, Larry, can you get this blurb in? Can you, I'm so excited about this, man. I'm so excited. We're going to have a great orchestra. But if you had the opportunity as a fan to cross paths with him, I think I've read so many testimonials from folks since he passed yesterday, that when they had the chance to meet him at a signing table at Vegas, or maybe even in passing, in and out of a show, just in a moment when you were smart enough and you appreciated enough, he was appreciative enough and cool. Ira was right. He was the coolest guy in the room, but cool enough to, not get mobbed, but to be so laid back that he could accept fans coming up, and give them a moment, because he sincerely believed that. He sincerely enjoyed. And I think that comes from the same place where Dee was, because they were later in their career, probably thinking, well, my performing, the days of anyone knowing my face are long gone, much less appreciating I'm doing. Even if I'm working, it's something that I'm not front and center. And to have a renaissance period in your life where you're given that chance, of course, you're backing it up. You're doing the thing. You're not slinking by, but to be given the chance and then to be able to prove on it, and then to see so many appreciative people, a whole new generation who had nothing to do with moondogging, or it's their kids or their grandkids. Those are one of those success stories that you love, but most of all, he was just such a good guy. You read all the testimonials. I've seen so many folks talk, Nana and on up and down the line, just talking about what a class act. Ira, obviously, but what a class act, what a class guy. And it's why Vic Fontaine was so authentic, whether he was counseling Kira and Odo, or whether he was, really counseling Nog with his PTSD in his leg, to get him back to facing reality again, of all the ironies of a holographic character encouraging someone to get back out in the real world. Just what a memorable character. What a memorable finale moment. I was there watching that scene be filmed, something I'll never forget. Taking part in some of the gags. Steve Oster, the line producers, drag song they did at the end of lunch break to get everybody in a good mood to come back. What a great, I almost the last of an era, but the fact that we had him so long and so vibrantly with us, and making so many people happy, and introducing a generation, or at least a half a generation, to the Great American Songbook, to that Vegas beat, the beat that the Rat Pack now riffs on and enjoys emulating. So yes, the rest of the world's going to moondog it, and the rest of the world's going to mic a Goodbye Crew world and Gidget it and surf it. And then the clued in world is going to say, Time Tunnel, DJ Hooker. But we know all of that and more. R.I.P. Jimmy. Someone said, I think Trekcore, someone said, we're going to leave the holodeck will always be running with Vic in our hearts. And that's true. That's a great sentiment. And yeah. So, gang, do any of you have a Jimmy Darren moment, story, favorite moment on screen, but even more so, did you ever get to see him live and in person? Because it was a trip. It was a trip. I think I remembered thinking at the time, this is just a slice of life that we're not going to be privileged and entitled to carry around live with us much longer. So enjoy the hell out of this right now while you can. It's amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, rest in power, Jimmy Darren. I'm glad we had the interactions, and glad that I got to be his advance man for several occasions there. What a guy. What a guy. Well, I want to thank, and we have let me get everybody back here. Boom. We've got our TTLers for my Patreon. So I do want to thank those, whether they're in, we have a very simple Patreon. So our TTL club, thank you. Chuck A., James Kerwin, Diana Hopkins, Jesse of Crusher Convo, Lawrence Todd, Halbjörn Gunnjonsson, Galinda Bruton, Andrew Jasimski, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Chris Jiggins, Keith Rombach, and Comedy Forecast. And our live wires, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Alan Hoenzi, James, Dave Gregory, Greg Wickstrom, and Casey Shafsky. Really want to thank everybody for jumping in and helping that. I keep it simple. There's just 2 tiers, $5, $10. It's a very simple patreon.com/Trekland Live. There we go. I've got to, you live wires, I keep saying it every week. I really do need to get you the new round of Portal 47 interviews from the earlier days there. I really, really want to thank everybody in the Patreon. And I really want to just throw out a reminder again about TreklandTreks.com. It's your day trip. It's a day tour of 4 sites around greater SoCal that I help you plan. We go to your favorites, whatever makes sense for the moment. I cut down, minimize the hassles, the questions, the mysteries. I am your chauffeur, your concierge. I'll even be your prop wrangler and your cosplay assistant, if that's what you want to do at your favorite places. Anyway, TreklandTreks.com. Check that out. It's the time of year. It's the time of year. This heat wave will pass, and then we'll be there. And it's a Tuesday once again. You know what that means? It's another Trek Files that are up now at our new home at thetrekfiles.com. It's our page on Memory Alpha. That's a direct link. You can database, you can scroll the whole 12-season roster. We're midway through season 12. The latest show's up today. It's my old buddy and former boss, Dan Madsen. We're talking about Star Trek 3. Yeah, it's the 40th anniversary still. And we're looking at it from the standpoint of where it was in fandom's flow as a new movie back then. You know, we had no idea about A, B, C, or D, bloody. We only knew about our original cast at the time, and Dan talks about covering that for the magazine at the time when the magazine, the official fan club communicator magazine, was the only real magazine. Starlog was there and would have bits, but wall to wall, it was communicator, and Dan was in the hot seat there in the Nexus Point. Great discussion. Find it wherever fine pods are found. Our Facebook page still has the link, but the reader, the documents of the week, and the deep links are all right there at Memory Alpha. And our page, the Trek Files at Memory Alpha. And of course, if you're leaving us now, hi YouTubers, it's Larry Nemecek on Twitter X and Larry's Trekland at Facebook and Instagram. And of course, here on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know. We're about to get a little busier as things pick back up here with Lower Decks coming down the line in October. Some more live events will be happening. Cadet Alice and I are due to check in and get going on Prodigy's 2nd season. That's all coming up in the future. Portal47.net's how you keep up with everything going on. Right now, it's your Minicon all year long. And the Portales, we have another guest night tomorrow night with visual effects legend from the Enterprise and Voyager days. Rob Bonchoon is our guest tomorrow night. So that's going to do it, gang. If you are leaving us now on YouTube, please, till next time, stay well, do all the things, stay healthy, and yeah, stay woke. Check the sources, and Trek well, everybody.